please, I'd encourage you, if you're sitting there thinking you're broken and that there's something wrong with you, that's not. You've just gone through an experience. And it's the experience, it's not who you are. It's not your identity. It's not who you're called to be in life.
Hey, it's Jeziel here for another episode of 98.5's Table Talk, where we give short answers to tall topics. And joining me today, it is the CEO of Richmond Wellbeing. It is Adrian Munro. Adrian, how you going?
I'm going great. My biggest week of the year, Mental Health Week.
Of course.
A great time when we're the spotlight. Everything's shining on mental health. So one of my greatest weeks is like a kid in Christmas. It's great.
What do I do? So many presents. So I guess, what are you bringing to the table today?
Well, really some practical support for the family, because I know that mental health is an impact that it's something that impacts everyone, and people are always looking for practical advice and the right advice that meets them, because there's lots of advice out there, some great, some not so. Yeah. So I thought we'd try and provide some practical advice around some of the key themes for Mental Health Week.
We will touch on those practical things you just mentioned, but let's back it up a little bit. Let's talk about the impact our mind, our body, our environment when it comes to mental health. Can you walk us through what impact does it have on those areas? Quite
a lot. So human beings, some of us are really good at compartmentalizing every part of our life and who we are. And I think, well, I've got my physical person, my mental person of who I am, the spiritual component. Then I'm a dad, I'm a husband, and we compartmentalize and break ourselves up, and we think that they don't impact or transform across that. And the truth is, absolutely do. So we can't, as complex people, we can't separate our physical health from our mental health. And it doesn't mean that, you could still be really healthy and have some poor mental health, but over time, there is a correlation between the two. Right. So if someone is experiencing poor mental health, and they want to try and improve it, they need to look at also their physical health, because the two are interrelated. Also, our experiences as a person. So often we think, look, we're moving forward, we're focusing on what's coming up in the future, and we're leaving our past behind. And that might be a good notion, but for some people, unfortunately, they've experienced some trauma or really distressing things in their life. And you might have tried to move on, you might have a totally new family, new career, and that's great. But what Mental Health Week is saying is that actually our past experiences continue to shape who we are. Right. And unless we deal with those things, they can continue to shape us negatively into the future. So Mental Health Week, one of the key themes about saying, yes, let's look at mental health, but let's also look at the physical health and our past experiences, because we're complex people and it all kind of mashes together to give the end product of our mental health and who we are.
Is it, going off script here a little bit,
right.
you mentioned about trauma, or living a life with a lot of stress. If we focus just on the trauma, if you think of something really traumatic, okay, let's go to the extreme. Let's say you were abducted as a child, and you walk away from that as an adult, and you're thinking, no, I don't have any trauma from that. Could you have gotten over that and be happy, or do you think there's always an underlying thing that someone actually has to go to a psychologist and work through? Can you just get over it by yourself?
Well, this is really complex. A great question. So there can be some people who leave war-torn areas in third world countries and come to Australia, and they're able to move on quite quickly. And it's hard for me to sit here and say if someone has or hasn't overcome that. But usually, if people haven't done some work and some reflection to overcome that trauma, it's very unlikely that it's not continuing to have a bad impact. But people would need to go to a psychologist for that professional opinion. But this is what's really interesting, is sometimes people say, well, my parents separated when I was 17, and compared to other people, they've gone through much worse, so I should be able just to move on fine. But that's not the case. And sometimes, some people can overcome the most terrible, unspeakable trauma, and then some people will sit there and say, my trauma is really quite small, maybe I should be fine. But what we see in the research and the evidence is that's not the case. And if you're sitting there saying, well, I went through a relatively small trauma at 21, but it's really impacted me, you're not broken. It's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. That's just your experience. And for whatever reason, that thing that you think is actually quite small is having a really disproportionate impact. But that happens for lots of people. And we don't know why certain people respond differently to different traumas. We just know that people feel sometimes ashamed or less than, because they think, I should have been able to get over that. And so that's a really important message for the family listening and watching today is, if you're having trouble overcoming some trauma in your life, do not sit there feeling that you're bad, that you're less than, or judging yourself, and don't let other people say, well, hold on, that's not a big deal. I've had worse. That's not a good thing to say to people. So if you're sitting there listening today with unresolved trauma, big or small, that's fine. You are who you are. That's how you were made, and that's fine. And you should go and get the help. Also, if you have friends and family members who you're trying to support, who you might have said to them previously, oh, look, that's not a big deal. You should just move on. Yeah. You should change your approach and say, actually, and try and listen for that person. And if someone is having trouble overcoming trauma, big or small, it's that other person's load. You need to support them, and they should be getting some professional support and assistance to overcome that. It's really, really complex trauma, but it's really important for us to know that people from all walks of life, and doesn't matter if it was last year or 60 years ago, that's professional services can make a really big difference. Going to your GP, talking to counsellors, psychologists, people who you trust, people you can talk to, talking about it is the first step.
All right, so let's get a little bit practical right now. Someone watching might be thinking, hey, look, I'm living with a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. Can you give me some practical steps to help me overcome this?
Yes. So I guess some things are best supported by by healthcare professionals. And if people want specific advice, definitely go to your GP, go to a psychologist. But the first thing for people to realise is humans are very good at catastrophizing things in our own mind. We're very good at convincing ourselves that something's wrong with me, so I'm broken, I'm not like everybody else. The most important thing to start with is for people listening to realise many people are going through this. So please, I'd encourage you, if you're sitting there thinking you're broken and that there's something wrong with you, that's not. You've just gone through an experience. And it's the experience, it's not who you are. It's not your identity. It's not who you're called to be in life. So separate what's occurred from who you are as a person. Okay. Realize that all these thoughts going around in your mind that you might feel you're less value or less worth, that is not true. And as you reach out to a GP or a pastor or a counsellor or psychologist, that's where you can start to see, well, what's the fact versus the fiction that you've built up in your mind. Yeah. And it astonishes me at Richmond Wellbeing how often we support people that say, look, when I came here, I was at my lowest point. I didn't think there was a way. I didn't think I could ever work through my trauma. I can assure the people listening, I can't guarantee what will happen to you in your life, but it is so common that people build up in their mind that their trauma is something they can never overcome. Wow. And if we wrote a book at Richmond of all the people supporting the trauma they've overcome, I would encourage you, there is a way to gain support. There are services out there. You'll have friends and family who want to listen. You just need to let them in. But once you start talking about this, you can work through this. You'd be astonished the amount of trauma that people are able to work through to lead a really fulfilling, happy life. And does it mean, oh, well, you're totally over it and forgotten it? Maybe not. Yeah. Maybe it's something you work through for the rest of your life. But it can often be something, wow, I'm stronger. I'm a bigger, better, stronger person. I can overcome anything because I overcame that trauma. Yeah. I would encourage the family listening and watching to think, this is an opportunity for me to overcome this. There's support out there. I'm not as broken as I think I am. I'm bigger, better, stronger than what I think I am, and I can get through this if I reach out. The first thing is reaching out and realizing you're not a broken, devalued person. You are a valuable person. You have worth as a person. You can work through this. Just reach out for the help. That's probably the first practical step for anyone listening or watching today.
That's awesome. If we don't focus so much on the trauma side of things, everyday people that might be thinking, look, I'm all right. Like, I'm not dealing with a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. Maybe it's just the day-to-day stress of your work, of your family, the everyday stresses. But how do we maintain a good mental health within us. How do we do that if it's
Yeah.
just your standard stresses?
Yes, so really good practical steps. So I know some people think, talking about exercise and diet again, but it matters. Regular exercise and a good diet matters. Really good quality time with a spouse or partner or significant other. Also really good quality time with your kids. So separating that time out. What is also really good, the evidence is so clear. If you participate in a community group, that is a great protective mechanism for your mental health. If you volunteer at this community group, it's also a great protective mechanism. So the number one best thing you can do, and so if you look at, say, men, for example, so much of our lives can be our family and work, and that's it. And obviously we need to be focused to work, we need to be focused on our family. But where men's mental health really improves and increases is when they have an outlet separate to work and family, where they have other men and other friends and other families where they can do some exercise and volunteer and have that other connection. So we often refer to it as the third place.
Right.
But even for anyone of any walk of life, if you're connected in a community and you're volunteering in that community, it's so fantastic for your mental health. And for me, it's sport, but for some people, it might be a chess club, it might be a cooking club, art group, choir, whatever it is. Participating in a community group is so valuable, and it's such a great thing for promoting really good mental health and well-being. But as I said, it's also the regular exercise and eating well. And I'm not saying people will eat out a bit and people have their treats, and that's fine. But overall, on balance, just having a good diet and regular exercise is all part of helping to people manage the regular stresses that you talk about.
That's perfect. I've got the perfect thing to tell my wife this afternoon. I need to go join a golf club.
Yes.
Adrian said so.
Yep.
So this is perfect. Thank you so much.
You need to play 18 holes twice a week. Yes.
Absolutely perfect. Hey, it's been my absolute pleasure chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of 98.5's Table Talk. My guest, it has been Adrian Munro, the CEO of Richmond Wellbeing. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you soon for another episode of Table Talk.